The Entrepreneur MBA Podcast purpose is to help existing business owners grow their companies past the 20 million in revenue per year benchmark. Here is your host, Stephen Halastik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halastik, and I'm co-founder and managing partner of Financing Solutions. Financing Solutions is a leading provider of lines of credit to small businesses. Our line of credit program is fast, easy, and inexpensive, and costs nothing to set up, making it a great cash backup plan for yourself. As an experienced entrepreneur myself, I really believe that every business should have a line of credit, just in case. If you would like to learn more about our line of credit program, please visit us at www.fscreditline.com. That's like FS as in Financing Solutions, creditline.com. Or give us a call at 862-207-4118. Today, I am excited to be speaking with my good friend, Henry Daas, whom I have known for 20 years. Henry is a serial entrepreneur, business and financial coach, screenwriter, and a recent author of an excellent book called FQ, Financial Intelligence. Henry actively trades the financial markets and manages a few select people's money. When Henry isn't working, he is an avid traveler, golfer, and tennis player. He has been married for 30 years and has been actively involved in raising 3 adult boys. Henry, welcome to today's Entrepreneur MBA Podcast.
Thanks, Steve. I feel honored to be here.
Well, so am I. I'm honored that you came on board. So when you came out with this book, FQ Financial Intelligence, I thought it really resonated with the way I kind of feel about the 25 years that I've been involved in building companies, and that I wish I had the book 25 years ago. And when we're going to talk a lot about the book as relates to today's topic, which is what business owners should do about personal finance, because I think a lot of people think 90% of their effort goes into building their companies, and they don't think about the personal finance side of it. So when you went to write the book, although I know it's not exactly geared to just entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general, why did you think it was a good topic?
Wow, that's a wonderful question. Very weighty. I guess at its most basic level, I thought to myself, you think about all the schooling you go through. You start school when you're maybe 5 years old, and if you go to university, you're going to spend 17 years in school. So think about your own schooling experience. Did anybody anywhere along the line teach you about money and finance? For me, since I can't speak for anyone else, that was no. I mean, my parents did, but my parents were intimately involved with that. But I don't know if that's the same for a lot of other people. I mean, I'm an engineer. I spent 4 years studying calculus, 2 years in high school, 2 years in college. I've never used that in my life. But nowhere along the line did anybody teach me how to balance a checkbook. I had to figure that one out for myself, or how to create a net worth statement or a balance sheet or a statement of cash flows. All of that had to be done outside of the regular school that we all attended.
Yeah, I tell you, Henry, I love the title. I mean, because a lot of us know EQ, which stands for emotional intelligence. All of us, of course, know IQ, but FQ, which is the start of your book, the title of your book, FQ, Financial Intelligence. It really makes a lot of sense that we have to be much better at understanding the financial aspects of our lives. Would you agree?
Oh, without question. It's funny, when I came up with the FQ, I had like this lightning bolt, and I thought it was so unique. And then, of course, I started Googling it, and yeah, it's been around for a while. I wouldn't say that it's been highly publicized, but I found other things out there, other folks. It makes total sense. And if you actually go out on the internet or look for courses or read books, you'll find that they're very tactically oriented, right? So if you want to learn how to get out of debt, right, you can find a million things. There's a million places you can go, and they'll teach you the snowball technique or the avalanche technique, very tactical stuff. But there's nobody out there talking to you strategically about, hey, how about we don't get into debt in the first place, right? That might be a good strategy for moving forward. And the earlier you start, the better opportunity you'll have to never need to learn how to get out of debt, because you'll never get there.
Yeah, I get it. I think, you said that you're using your analogy of when you went to college and talking calculus, and you said, you never use that again. You've never used it, but you said that nobody really teach you about personal finance, but no one ever teaches you about entrepreneurship either.
Well, that's actually changing.
I agree.
For instance, my youngest son, Mark, who's a freshman at University of Utah in Salt Lake City, they have an entire dormitory. It's called Lassonde, and it's 500 kids, and it's all entrepreneurial based. They do projects. So I wish that was around in the 70s when I went to college, because it wasn't. You had electrical engineering, chemical engineering, civil. You didn't even have computer engineering. It hadn't even existed yet. So there are changes coming, but they're coming slowly.
Yeah, so let's talk about entrepreneurs in general when it comes to personal finance. Would you agree that what we see as, because I know you're a serial entrepreneur, and what we often see and what we've had our own personal experiences in is that when you first start off your business, you're always thinking about the top line, which is sales. And then after a couple of years, you kind of get a little smart because you're growing this top line. And then you start to realize, well, wait a minute, I'm not making anything out of this. So then you start to get a little smarter, and it certainly depends on strategy. Then you start to look at your profit, your net profit. And then the next series after the entrepreneur grows a little bit, and we're talking at the maybe 8 and 10 year mark, you have a going concern. Then you start to say, well, wait a minute, I still don't seem to be able to get the money into my personal life. And then the experiences that I've seen, even with my own, is then you think that your money that you're making is going to be unlimited, and you just keep spending a lot on expensive dinners or expensive vacations or expensive cars and jewelry. Do you agree with that whole chain of events that I just described?
It's pretty accurate. When people start their first business, yes, they're concerned about sales. I want deals, even if they're not profitable. When I started my first business, God, it's almost 30 years ago. It was that. And I took on a lot of bad deals. I spent a lot of time on things because it might have been a $50,000 deal, but I just wasn't making any money on it, but I didn't care. It took a while to really figure out, okay, it's the profitability that really matters. And I might actually have to turn away business. I've actually said to people that you're not a real company until you can say no, until you can look at a piece of business. We call it low-hanging fruit. Somebody comes to you, has a deal, it looks great. It didn't take any effort to get that sales lead. But it's a bad deal, and yet people will do it anyway. But the other issue that comes up a lot with new entrepreneurs is they don't segment their business finances and their personal finances. I've actually met more than a few entrepreneurs who manage their personal life right through the business. They don't even have a personal checking account. Everything is conflated, and that, I think, is a real bear trap. You need very early on to recognize the fact that the company is a separate organism, right? In America, as soon as you create, they call it corporate personhood, right? As soon as you get an EIN number for a new company, that's a new entity, and you need to treat it as such, and you can't just mix it in. Then it gets totally confusing and almost impossible to unwind.
So are you an advocate of people not running personal expenses through their business, or do you believe you should be able to track that and using a different, a notepad or something else?
You should be able to track it. You should have, the good accountants that I've had in the past, and I've had a bunch of businesses, would always set up a separate, owner's account. So if I charged a dinner or something like that on the credit card, they would ask me, is this a business expense or a personal expense? If it's a personal expense, it goes into that account. And at the end of the year, you settle it up. If it means that you have to take a 1099 or add it to your W-2, you did what you needed to do. Some people run everything through their business. Everything's a business expense. They'll pay their kids' college tuition through their business. It's just not kosher. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that it's illegal, it's giving you a false idea of what your cash flow is, right? Because the business hit a slump, and we've all lived through them. I lived through the crash of '87. I lived through the dot bomb, just like you, and I lived through the Great Recession. I think Warren Buffett said it best. It only when the tide goes out do we know who's swimming naked, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to swim naked. You want to swim. I don't want to say you want to swim fully clothed, but you know what I mean.
Yep. It's interesting when I talk to business owners, because of financing solutions, I'll say to them, so how much do you make? And they'll say, well, I make $90,000 a year. Right. And then I'm like, okay, now how much personal expenses do you run through the business? And they don't know. So then I'll say, okay, well then let's say we look at it and they say, well, we find out that they run $50,000 out of the business, through the business. And then I say, okay, are you running your car, any other expenses? And then they actually find another $20,000
right
through the business. So, they're thinking that they're making 90. Instead, they're making 160 or whatever it adds up to, and I find that most entrepreneurs don't even have a handle on how much their business is really making. So when I read through your book and I looked at this one section that you had called a personal balance sheet,
right?
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the other term for that might be a net worth statement. So anybody who's ever applied for a mortgage, when you get that boilerplate paperwork, they want you to list your assets and your liabilities, right? And that is for a company, you have a balance sheet. You've got assets and you've got liabilities. Now, companies, it's a little different, because you may have capital assets that have to be depreciated, which usually doesn't happen in the personal world. And I don't want to get too technical or to go down that rabbit hole. But the idea is you say, okay, this is everything I have as an asset. This is what I own. I have a house. I've got cars. I've got this. I've got that. I might have jewelry, right? I keep it all in a Quicken file. And then here are the liabilities. I have a car loan. I may have the mortgage, a whole bunch of different things, and I balance it out. And the bottom line should be a number that's in the black, right? Let's say you're 35 years old and you balance that out, and it says, okay, I've got the example that I used in my book. I just simply made up what I thought was a representative family, and they have a net worth of $400,000. But then you've got to take it the next level, which is another part of my book that I talk about. I call it the thick green line, which is, okay, what are the things that we really can't measure with a net worth statement? And those, to use the corporate term, would be contingent liabilities. So what does that mean? Example might be paying for college. That might not be reflected anywhere on that balance sheet, but you may be looking at a large, I've got 3 kids. There may be a large college bill that's 20 years down the line if you have babies at home. You've got to now take it to the next level and think about, okay, how am I going to plan for that? How am I going to pay for that? And again, the sooner I start doing that, the easier it will be to do.
Yeah.
Same thing with retirement. People turn around in their mid-50s, and I know a few of them, and they haven't put away anything for retirement. It's not too late, but if you'd started 25 years ago, you'd be way ahead of the game.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really caught my attention with the personal balance sheet is the idea that listing all your assets and liability for your business, and also listing all the assets and liability for your personal life to come up. And I know you're saying that, but I tell you, one of the things that really, people don't think of their accounts receivable that they have, because let's face it, almost every business owner has their personal cash involved in the business, and yet there's nowhere on their personal balance sheet that they're keeping where they say they consider that an asset. And then, of course, the accounts payable, what they owe other people as a liability, and then the value of their home minus their mortgage, and then all the other investments that they might have. And when you put that all together, you have a better sense. What is my net worth?
Correct.
Now, I know you coach quite a number of people. Have you ever seen them come to you and they are already doing this?
Well, nobody does it to quite the degree that I do, and that's the degree that I think people should do it to. They may do a snapshot, a balance, a net worth statement or a balance sheet, whatever you want to call it, is a snapshot in time, right? So as of today's January 8th, here's what my balance sheet looks like. But then you've got to look at it over the course of time. You've got to take that individual snapshot and turn it into a movie, because it's not going to stay the same, right? You might have a whole bunch of equity in your house today. Well, if today is 2007, wait a year or two and that equity has evaporated, right? So you're trying to look at the here and now, but just like all entrepreneurs do, you look at the here and now, but you've got to project. You've got to look, where are we going to be, quarter by quarter, year by year? We've got to think in like a 3-year time window. With business, I consider it a 3-year time window. Personally, I think you really have to look, in many cases, 20 years out. And that's very, very hard for people to do, because there's just a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts.
So what do you say to listeners who, they have this business and they say, I'm not really making any money. I mean, I'm just, whatever's coming in, I'm paying my bills, and, I really don't have any excess money. What do you say to someone like that?
Well, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you've got to go back and really determine whether you have a business or whether you've just created a job for yourself that you can't quit.
Yeah.
And I've coached some folks that are like that. There are really only two things from a business standpoint that you need to uncover in order to determine whether you have a going concern: gross margin and cash flow. That's it. If you can figure out those and get a handle on those, you can pretty much run any kind of business. But what I've seen is people just don't know their numbers. Yeah. I know entrepreneurs who manage their business based on their bank account. Well, if the bank account has 10 grand in it, I must be making money. I'm like, in what world does that make any sense? Like you just talked about receivables. What are your receivables? What do you owe your vendors? You're looking at a tiny little picture that's giving you the false sense that you're making money. And then one day you wake up and realize, hey, I can't make my mortgage payment. I got this wonderful business that I've had for a couple of years, but it really isn't what it's cracked up to be. I would be better off going out into cubicle world and just working for somebody else.
See, I mean, you're so right. I mean, I think it took like 10 years ago, what I really dawned on me was that the most important part of being in business is, are you growing your net worth? It certainly depends on the business, but like if you're involved with angel funding. In other words, if you're trying to get funding and you're working in, trying to build a really huge company, that's a different story. But I think it comes down to when you're doing your personal balance sheet, am I increasing my net worth? Would you agree with that?
I think you really do need to focus on that, right? There's an old saying, it's not what you make, it's what you keep, right?
Yep.
You've got to put away money for all those things that are coming that, people call it a rainy day fund. I mean, it's amazing. There are millions of Americans who look forward to a tax refund. And I scratch my head and say, if that's the only way you know how to save is to have the government take your money, give it back to you a year and a half later with no interest, right? If that's what it is, and then that's your vacation fund. I mean, it's not that difficult to say, well, let's not do that. Let's not be over withheld. Let's just take that money, even if it's $50 a month, and put it in a no-load mutual fund, right? Or something like that. If you extrapolate that over years, what did Einstein say? The greatest mathematical invention of mankind is compound interest.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's staggering when you look at the numbers over the course of time. Now, again, 20 years is tough for people to hold in their mind. It's tough for most people to hold 20 minutes in their mind, no less 20 years. But if you want to achieve success, whether it be entrepreneurial or just working for somebody else, and like you said, increase my net worth, that's the movie we're talking about. Is what does that movie look like year over year? Is it going up? Is it going sideways? Is it going down?
Yeah, you don't have to have a business too to feel that way.
No, not at all. Well, if you work, there are people out there who make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and yet every year they're broke. Right? It comes in, it goes out.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I am not somebody who watches, what I spend. But what saved me, I think, often is I don't have a lot of expensive taste. Like, I don't buy super expensive cars, and the investments I have made in a house or in my office buildings or that stuff, they've paid off. So I don't buy expensive jewelry and stuff like that, and that's helped. But I think you find a lot of entrepreneurs that they really keep spending without understanding that that's affecting their ability in the future to continue being an entrepreneur. Do you see that often?
Well, think about when the .com bubble burst 20 years ago. And again, for younger listeners who weren't on the front lines of that, you walked into these offices, and we were in the leasing business at the time. So we were leasing these people millions of dollars. And these offices were gorgeous. They were spending $1,000 for Herman Miller Aeron chairs, and they're everywhere. And then they went belly up, and they all went for pennies on the dollar afterwards. When I read Peter Lynch's One Up on Wall Street back in the 70s and 80s, he used to go visit companies as a potential investor. And this is a guy who was running the Magellan Fund, a multi-billion-dollar fund. When he saw old office furniture, he smiled, because it's like $100 chair or $1,000 chair. It's still, it does the same thing. It's still just like a Timex or a Rolex do basically the same thing, right? They tell you.
Yeah.
And they made all sorts of excuses about how, well, in order to attract the top talent, I can't put them in the $100 chair. Nonsense. That's nonsense. That's not.
Yeah.
I don't believe that that's what's important to rank and file. I think people seduce themselves into that fact, when in the reality was, we're here for so many other things in the work environment.
Yeah. You mentioned something before, and it really made me think of this, and that you said gross margins, and what we're gonna talk about that in a second. But if you had to, let's say you have some new clients, or you're looking at someone, the people that you're coaching, and they really don't have any KPIs, key performance indicators. What are the top key performance indicators that you would typically go over with your client a lot?
Well, one of the areas that a lot of folks miss, especially if you are a service related business, is they really just don't know what their cost of goods sold are. Mm-hmm. Right? they're not doing a very good job of tracking it. So if you've got a bullpen of, say, content creators at all sorts of different price points, and they're working on a variety of different clients at the same time, there may be a sort of a mixed bag of that. You need to parse that out and figure out, okay, what did it cost? Use that example because I have a client who's in the content creation business. Do you really know what it cost to create this 2,500 word article, right? That you're producing for someone that's going to put up on their site. And this particular client actually does a very good job of it. But some of it still has to be ballparked a little bit because you don't want to turn this into an exercise where you're spending so much time and man hours trying to track this. You got to ballpark it a little bit, but you'll know within a range, right? Then you take those numbers. So let's say that is that $2,500 article, you're charging someone $500 for it, and you figure out that your cost is, $250, right? So basically 100% margin. You need to take that information when you're looking at the sales cycle and trying to onboard new clients and to say, can I still make that margin on them? Right. And if I can't, this is where it gets tough. And I alluded to it earlier. If you can't, you have to say no. Sorry, you do not fit the profile of our company. And then you're back into that. You've got to, if you want to level up, you've got to simply say, no, I can't take on your business.
Yeah, so I'll give you the example of where that happened to me in my life. My sister had a similar business to mine, and it was in the staffing business. And she would go out, and if she could place and make $1 or $2 or $3 on top of her costs, she would do it because she felt, well, that's a $2 or $3 more than I didn't have before. But what I would talk to her about is the idea that, yes, but now you have to have staff to support that person, that staffing person who's out there working for you. It's a temporary staffing. You have to be worried about, can you handle the other business that's coming in? And whereas my business that I was doing, which was a little similar to hers, I wouldn't do the business unless I got at least a 25% margin. And she went out of business.
Yeah.
And she never really understood why.
Yeah.
And it was because she had a $20 million company and she had payroll that was huge, but she wasn't making the margin. Right. So one of the things I learned on this is, the higher the margin, the better the business.
Yeah. Well, no question. But remember, what's the corollary to that? Which is the idea that people tend to flood in to high margin business because they recognize it's a high margin business.
Yeah.
So your competition becomes stiff. What you're talking about with your sister is what we refer to as opportunity cost, right? So if I take on a bunch of dollar clients, I'm now burning up resources. So when the $3 client comes along, I no longer have the resources in order to do that. When I was in the leasing business, way back in the day, my partner ran the leasing side of things, and he would go down the rabbit hole of doing these little teeny leases for people, what we called app-only leases. Under 50,000 was application only. We didn't have to go through a lot of work. But I used to say to him, I said, listen, it's the same amount of effort on our side to do a $10,000 lease as it is to do a $10 million lease. And we did $10 million leases. Where do you think you should spend your time? We make a lot more money on the $10 million leases.
Did he get it?
No, he never got it.
Well, all right. So the other KPI we mentioned, which we don't need to talk a lot about, but tracking your net worth, right? What other KPIs do you think a business owner should be tracking on a consistent basis?
Other KPIs, they should be looking at, infrastructure costs. right? For if you're a SaaS business, right, software as a service business, a lot of my clients are in that world. You see a little bit of creep, right? So AWS might raise their prices, or other services that are on the line. And usually, for at least for the smaller ones, that's a huge part. If we start putting together their P&L, it's not unusual for those infrastructure costs to be 30 or 40 or 50% of their costs, and that'll get away from you. These are highly, highly competitive markets. They're basically commoditized. So anything that is commoditized like that, you need to review every 6 months, right? Is there a better value in a hosting service? Not only that, you can then use that information and leverage it with your existing vendors and go back to them and say, hey, listen, I've noticed your prices have popped up. Your competitors are a little more price sensitive. Give me an incentive to stay. And it's amazing how many entrepreneurs don't want to have that conversation, right? It's almost, it's like going to negotiate for a car, right? People are like, I just don't want to negotiate. I feel nervous about it. I don't want to make a mistake. Well, if that's the case, then just pay the MSRP and go, but you're leaving money on the table. So that's a big part. Same thing with human capital costs, right? What it costs for going back to the idea of the content creator. You know, a content creator based in a Western country might be, $20 an hour. In Saigon, it might be $2 an hour. Are you getting the same value? No, the quality of it may not be exactly on par. But if you hire a high-end editor, they can fix that. And the incremental savings are huge. Again.
What about on a personal level? What type of KPIs, we mentioned that, net worth, but is there something that you would recommend people look at on a constant basis in regards to their personal life, tracking those?
Insurance costs. Every year I review health insurance. It never goes down and only goes up, but it's a yearly event. I'm always looking at it because those are volatile markets. Mortgage, again, we've lived for the last probably 15 years, maybe longer, in a very low interest rate environment, but it hasn't always been that way. So take a look at that, because a few basis points difference, again, it may not be worth the trouble to go through all the paperwork to refinance, but it's worth an exercise, and it doesn't take all that long. And if it can save you significant amounts of money. And then there's the other side, which is your investments. Like, where is your money, right? Where are you, from a personal standpoint, where's your money? Is it in a bank? Is it in the mattress? Is it in the markets? If so, is it in the right markets? That's big, because the combination of reducing expenses and increasing income is how you can increase your net worth. You can only drive your expenses down so low, right? But on the income side from investments, the sky's the limit, right? Last year, the S&P 500 was up 28%. There have been years where it's been up even more than that. But you can only drive the interest rate on your mortgage down so low before it becomes a fool's errand. And you're spending dollars to save pennies, and nobody wants to do that.
What do you think is, from a finance standpoint, is another issue that you see with business owners?
Well, one issue that is universal and that I talk about a lot is risk. People do not, this is a very blanket statement, but I'm going to make it. People do not understand risk, don't understand how to mitigate risk and how to manage risk, right? Whether you're a business owner or whether you're talking about your personal finances, if you're a W-2 employee, the concept eludes a lot of folks, right? So
give me an example.
Right, so an example might be taking on a mortgage that's too big, right? You've decided, okay, I want to move to a better community because they have better schools for my school age children. Great. Very, very, very smart, right? You want to have the best opportunity for your family. And so you say to yourself, well, I'm going to stretch myself a little bit because I really can't afford to live in this community, but I'm going to stretch it for the benefit of the kids. And that's a rationalization. And then you're there for a few years. You take out an adjustable mortgage. The property taxes are high because generally that correlates with good schools. And it might have been manageable day one, right? But then, you really didn't get the raises that you wanted. A lot of people in corporate America, they get 1% to 2% raises, but property taxes are going up and the cost of maintaining the house is going up. And now you turn around 5 years from now and you're in some trouble, right? That has happened a million times over. That came into very sharp relief 10 years ago during the housing crisis, where people were underwater. They had negative equity in their house. And smart money move was to just walk away from the house than it was to try to save it.
Yeah, there's another problem too, and that is if your goal is to be self-employed for your whole life, or whatever, for a long time, that's the risk you're running is that that decision could affect your ability to stay self-employed down the road.
Sure
because
can.
now you have this cash that's been going out the door the other side, and you can't invest it in your business. Or as Henry and I both have been through, when there's a correction in the market, there's a recession, there's an issue, you don't know how your business really is. I mean, everybody thinks their business is really good during an expansion in the economy. And then comes the recession, and that's when you really find out how good your business really is.
I say success is a great deodorant, right? Your business is rolling along, and then all of a sudden, something, out of left field, or maybe not even out of left field. I mean, a lot of people saw the financial crisis coming. A few people, if you've ever read The Big Short, a few people capitalized on it big time. Most people, myself included, got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
My business, my wife's business,
Sure,
they got hurt.
Sure.
Now, the difference was we were backstopped. We had assets. We had been spending our entire adult life accumulating assets to build our balance sheet. So if the day came where our P&L, our income statement, went down, that's okay. We had resources that we could use, that we could put into play to get us through the difficult time. Because these economic swoons, they don't last forever, right? So the goal is to get through them and come out the other side, right? And if you look at a stock chart starting in 07, it goes from 13,000 to down to 6,000. And since 6,000, it's now close to 30,000. It's a straight uphill 10-year climb. Is it going to stay that way forever? No. At some point, it will correct again because markets always do. So you enjoy it. You take profits when you can. You put them away, whether it be a rainy day fund or something else. You put them onto your personal net worth statement, and you use them, when the time arises. Hopefully, the time won't arise until you get to be the point where you want to retire, and then you have a really nice retirement because you've got money put away.
Well, I mean, I think Henry knows that two of the business I had, went up like hockey sticks, and then and then the recession hit, two different ones, and I had to close them down, after a period of time. But if it wasn't because I had built a net worth, I wouldn't have been able to start, other businesses. And, so, I'm a prime example, Henry, of what you're saying. And I know it happened to you as well.
Yeah. My leasing company, when before the Great Recession, when the whole dot bomb, we had a lot of money invested with dot bomb companies, and we were scrambling, trying to get money back out of that and the fact that the internet really changed the margins in that business.
Yeah.
We went from being a high margin business to being essentially a commoditized business. Anyone who goes to try to buy a used car will discover that there's no margin left in it because all prices are known by everyone. So you don't have to be a market theorist to understand the idea that if everyone has knowledge of every price that's available, that the margin will get squeezed out of that. That's just how that happens. If you're in a business like that, you've got to pivot. You've got to think to yourself, I need to move to something that has higher margin capability.
So, Henry, when you start meeting some of the clients that you're coaching for the first time, what is usually the first thing that you typically see that a large majority of them have issues with?
You're talking about specifically money or other things?
Well, I would say money.
All right. From a money standpoint, the simple thing is they don't know their numbers. They just don't.
Yeah.
If I ask them, what are your gross margins and what's your cash flow, I get crickets. They don't know. Now that's fairly easy to solve.
Yep.
Right? We'll just spend a little time and solve that. But the overarching issue that I deal with, whether it be with personal finance or business finance, is psychology. Right? The underpinnings. When I was writing my book, I cribbed Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which Abraham Maslow created back in the 1940s. It's a pyramid. Starts with the most basic things like, air and food and sleep, and you work your way up. Well, I did the same thing. And the base level is the psychology. Are you living in abundance? Are you living in scarcity? Or are you living somewhere in between? Because your psychological approach to money, again, whether it be business or personal, will be predicated on your attitude. What I tell people is, I can teach you to trade the stock market, but if you're too afraid to ever put on a trade, it's kind of a pointless exercise. It doesn't mean you shouldn't know about the stock market because it affects everything in the world, but you'll never be a trader unless you can get past that mindset. It's the same thing with entrepreneurs. Having spoken to them, they have a particular mindset that says, I can work without a net.
Yeah.
I can go my own way and do that. That's why they're so rare compared to the entire population. Entrepreneurs are very rare. And as well as I do that once an entrepreneur, pretty much always an entrepreneur. Right? Once you drink that Kool-Aid, even if you have an unsuccessful business, even if you have a series of unsuccessful business, most entrepreneurs are going to stick with it and say, no, this is my life.
Henry, do you think you were, even when you're in your 20s, you think you paid a lot of attention to what you talk about and find in your FQ book?
Oh, yeah.
You
yeah,
did?
no, I started... I cut lawns when I was 12 years old. I had my first W-2 job when I was 15. I collected unemployment when I was 16. I got fired from a job. I didn't have a driver's license. My mother had to drive me to the unemployment office in Plainfield, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Very eye-opening experience for a high schooler. Because my parents were depression babies. At least my mother was. And they lived in scarcity. I wrote about it in the book. Everything was colored by that. The sky is always falling. We'll never have enough money. And that was sort of drilled into me at a young age. And only now that I've turned 60, have I started to kind of move away and really not stop listening to those scarcity voices in my head, but saying to myself, you know what? I put 2 kids through college with no debt. I have a third in college and I have all the money put away for him. That's big. I don't see anything else on the horizon, barring some reversal of fortune in someone's health. Those contingent liabilities that I mentioned early on, I don't see those. So I can, to some degree, exhale a little bit. But I put in 40 years of work or almost 50 years of work to get to that point.
Yep.
That's the only reason that I can exhale now is I put in a lot of hard work, both as an entrepreneur and as a money manager, to get here. And that's what I encourage everyone to do. It's not rocket science. You don't need more than 5th grade math. You don't need 4 years of calculus to figure out how to manage your personal finance. It's really much simpler than people imagine. But you got to get over those psychological hurdles and those voices in your head that say, nah, this is rocket science. I can't do it.
Yeah, so we have a couple of minutes left. And what I'd like to do here is just kind of summarize some maybe action steps based on what we talked today. And I think the first one that I'm hearing from you, Henry, is that get educated about, finance and personal finance. I mean, finance sounds like a big word, but it's really just the basics, right?
Basics.
Yep. And, and that a good start would be, let's face it, pick up Henry's book, right?
Well, that's a little self-serving. Imagine you were trying to learn tennis, right? You're a tennis player. You're a much more advanced tennis player than I am. So what do you do when you want to learn tennis? You don't have to hire a fancy coach. Go get a racket and a ball and find a brick wall. We have one right here in my town. It's actually, specifically designed as a wall, and start hitting a ball against the wall, right? Doesn't have to be any more advanced than that. Just learn.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that the thing that I think is the most important is just starting to pick your KPIs, key performance indicators, in regards to both business and personal life, and really start to track those. Either you keep it updated on a quarterly or a yearly basis, or, depending, or it could be a monthly. I think that's a good start too. So after you do that, after you kind of educate yourself, pick your key performance indicators, what do you think is the next step?
The next step is probably more tactical. People in general, I'm making a generalization. Strategy is hard. Tactics are kind of easy. So you could say to someone, and I actually challenged one of my clients a couple of years ago to put away some money in a SEP account. I said, just $5,000. Could we commit in January that by the end of the year, you're going to put $5,000, and this is someone who's in the early 30s, put $5,000 in a SEP account, right? Just make that a goal, a simple tactical goal to get you used to the idea that I can do this, right? It's a little bit of a baby step.
Yeah.
Because it takes a commitment, right? People talk about, you want to start a business, you should be passionate about it. And I say, nonsense. You don't have to be passionate about it. You have to be committed to it, because there are times when it's going to suck or it's not going to be great. And it's the same thing with managing your personal finances. There are times when the market is going to make a big swoon, and you decided you wanted to get all in on the stock market or Bitcoin or whatever the case may be, whatever the flavor, the fancy, trendy, financial instrument is out there, and then you get your lunch taken away from you, which I think is valuable. It's good to get a good beat down every once in a while. Keeps you humble. Right?
It's good stuff, Henry. Yeah, it's really good stuff. So, I would really like to thank Henry for being on today's podcast. I thought it was really good, and I think it's a great lesson. If you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend, and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And of course, if you're looking for a line of credit for your business, you can call us at 862-207-4118 or visit our website at fscreditline.com. Henry, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they reach you?
The easiest way to get to me is to go to just my personal website, Henry Daas, DAAS, .com. And then I have links to my FQ book and links to my business coaching site and my screenplays and all sorts of other stuff. And I actually have a URL that's Henry DASS, because people misspell my name all the time. Even if you mistype my name, it will actually take you to the right website. That's the easiest thing. And the book is FQ: Financial Intelligence. If you just do a Google search on it, it'll take you to either BookBaby or to Amazon. If you go to BookBaby, if you use the URL freebie, FREEBIE.DAAS, DAASFQ.com, if you click on that link, it takes you into my funnel, and you can download my book for free.
Great. Thanks, Henry. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Steve. That was fun. I enjoyed it a lot.
So I just want to thank everyone for listening. I'll leave you with this one thought that one of my favorite baseball coaches used to tell our team all the time. And I think it's very applicable to entrepreneurship. And that is good, better, best. Never let it rest. To your good is better and your better is best. Have a great day, everybody.